Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here at Disrupt 2023. I'm Josh Liberatore, Executive Editor at Athletech News, here today with three founders of three of the truly disruptive companies in personal training. Really excited for this conversation, gentlemen. Thanks so much for being here. Before we dive in, I'll just ask all three of you to briefly introduce yourselves, tell us a little about yourself, your company, and what you guys are doing in the personal training industry. Curtis, we'll start off with you.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having me. My name is Curtis Christofferson. I've been in the health and fitness space, particularly the personal training space for the last 22 years. Based out of Vancouver, Canada, I expanded one of the largest chain of personal training studios in North America at 25 locations. We have about 300 full-time personal trainers as employees. And in 2019, I launched a digital platform called Workout, which now has evolved into a recommendation platform. So we connect the industry leaders with the top leading industry brands and products and make it easy for them to recommend and monetize off their influence. And so I'm excited to share a little bit more about that today. And that's a little bit about myself.
Yeah. Hey, Josh, thanks for having us. Appreciate you bringing us together. My background, so I run a company called Future, and I started my career in academia in physics and astrophysics. And then for about 15, 16 years now, have been building consumer products. And along the way, have had leadership positions at Google and at Postmates, where I ran product, a food delivery company that was acquired by Uber and is now Uber Eats. And then about 6 years ago, I started Future. And with Future, we connect every one of our members with a coach who guides their fitness journey. That coach will do basically three things for each person. And the first is every single Sunday, they build a new plan for the week. Our app will guide you through any exercise, lifts, runs, and so on. The second thing your coach does is we strap an Apple Watch to our customers so your coach can see if you're performing well or not. And then uses all of that data to further customize the plan, drive accountability. And then lastly, that coach is in touch with you every single day over text messages. On average, our members will trade over 1,000 text messages a year with their coach, something like 1,200, 1,300. And so there's a constant contact component to what we do. So that's just a little bit about us. And yeah, we'll get into this. I'm excited to talk more.
Thanks, Josh and Curtis and Rishi. Looking forward to chatting with both of you today at the super cool event Athletech's hosting here. So excited to be a part of it. I'm Austin Cohen, based out of New York, founder and CEO of Flexit. We launched this business back in 2019. Spent about half my career in venture, specifically consumer and consumer luxury, and the other half operating early stage companies, a repeat entrepreneur. Prior to this, we built a pretty big private jet business that we exited. And like Rishi, also have a soft spot for academia. I'm an adjunct professor at my alma mater. Super excited about what all three of the companies are doing here. At Flexit, we're trying to help more people to have access to personal training, which has traditionally been provided to a smaller portion of the population. So effectively trying to lower the price point and barriers to entry and help even folks who previously may not have thought that they were in the zone or in the game for a personal training experience, which we define as a live and one-on-one experience, as something that more people can access. And we're doing so not just in fitness, but what we call interconnected health. So everything from fitness training to nutrition, physical therapy, low impact wellness. There's about 30 modalities that we cover.
Thanks, guys. Really excited to speak with all three of you. Obviously this series is called Disrupt 2023. The topic is disruption in the fitness and wellness industry. But candidly, it's a term that maybe gets overused a bit, right? It's not true with these three companies here before us today. You guys are truly disrupting the personal training industry. So really excited for this conversation. This is for anyone. Feel free to jump in. Starting off, what did each of you see in the personal training market that made it ripe for disruption? And what's the biggest selling point of virtual personal training compared to in-person, in your opinion?
Sure. Let me start, and Austin, Curtis, feel free to jump in. So I think Austin referenced this. When we studied the most successful people, small groups of people among us who could maintain high performance or healthy living for extended periods of time, years on end, not the few months on end that most of us can hack on our own and then you fall off and get back on. When we looked at the small populations that can maintain high performance for extended periods of time, you think of professional athletes, Fortune 100 execs, A-list celebrities. These are small groups of people who have lots of demands on their time, but can be healthy and perform at a high level. What we found was universally, almost, across the board, they were getting help. It wasn't like they were just superior to your average, general population person. Typically, these folks could get help with a trainer who's telling them what to do, a chef who's stocking their fridge with 12 meals a week, or a number of different support structures. And what we found with personal training, which was the most common of those, is that it's incredibly expensive and just like Austin said, kind of relegated to kind of really honestly the rich, right? I mean, to pay $100 an hour is easily, if you want to have a few sessions a week, can become $20,000 a year. And that means it's a 1% solution ever. And it's a wonderful thing, but really limited in its reach. And when you study why is it so constrained and expensive, there's several kind of contributing factors, which I think our companies try to overcome or contend with. And one of those is that if I'm a personal trainer, IRL in the real world, I have a lumpy demand curve, right? Typically, everyone wants to work out at 6, 7, 8 a.m. before work or 6, 7, 8 p.m. after work. Maybe there's that little hour around lunch. And for the rest of the day, I am not as predictably engaged and utilized. And so I think what ends up happening is two things. One, you get a very constrained supply. Now everyone's competing for those small time slots. And two, as a coach, I have to charge an extraordinary amount of money for those busy morning and evening pockets because I'm not going to make a bunch of revenues throughout the day. And so that's a long way to say you have this lumpy demand curve, you have this forcing function of price, you have a lot of limited use of supply. And then finally, typically it's constrained to who is locally around me. And therefore you have kind of haphazard matching of supply and demand. And so this is what makes it inaccessible for most people. It can be inconvenient to sync schedules, to get across town, to have that hour together. And of course, it can be very expensive. And I think when you virtualize some of those things, you take away the co-location requirement, like, I think Austin and my companies really focus on. Now I can match with the perfect expert for me, not the person who just happens to be in town, right? And then Future and Flexit, I think, have looked at this a little differently. We actually have designed Future so that the workout itself is asynchronous. My coach builds every lift or workout for me personally, records all his voice notes in there, and then I'll hit start and go do it. And what happens when you actually take that live requirement out, you get a lot more leverage for every coach. So now as a coach, I may have 10 or 100 clients who want to work out at 6 a.m. Pacific, and that's okay. Now, the promise of connectivity then is the burden rises on the communication. So we have our coaches who are texting with you daily, and I mentioned this earlier, multiple times a day, every single day throughout the year. And that's where you get that pseudo synchronicity, where you're talking about, hey, get activated for this workout. Nice job. I see your heart rate got to 180 or something. And so that's just our take on this. But historically, this is a wonderful solution that is really restricted to a small group of people. There's that saying that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed yet. Not everyone can access it. And so I think when you think of how can we make a population of people healthier, there's a solution that's been in existence, highly efficacious for like 60, 70 years in personal training. And I think over the last 5, 10 years, you see this great energy of people saying, how do I bring that to more people and try to replicate the intimacy, the trust, the accountability of this in-person modality. So I'll stop there and open it up to you guys, but that's what we see at Future.
Yeah, I totally agree with a lot of the premises that Rishi shares there. The location issue, right? Having to get to a gym. Also, you have to have clothing on you, right? You have to be prepared. The price point, and then also there's an element to potentially with others around you in a physical location that not feeling necessarily comfortable. So what are other options for in person? If it's not at a physical fitness center, it's outside, which most people don't do, or it's at your home, which most people don't have the opportunity to do, right? That's back to that upper tier percentage wise. I don't think that, I mean, I don't want to speak for the group, but I don't think any of us here are asserting that it's virtual versus in person, right? So back to the original question, you asked about the selling point of virtual versus in person. I think it's that there's a coexistence of both, and that there's a cohort that can consume or is conditioned to consume both. And then there's cohorts that will consume one or the other. And so we live in an awesome world now where there's more opportunity, there's more accessibility. And I think to the point that Rishi made about, you know, the future being here and being ahead of the curve, I guess, pun intended there. If we take a step back in terms of what we're all trying to do, and I'll speak for us more specifically now, this category in the virtual world really only had asynchronous activity, pre-recorded and live streamed. But if we look at the other areas of our life, over the last 5-6 years, there's synchronous activity in almost all of those, right? So pandemic, how are we accessing healthcare, telehealth, teletherapy? How are we collaborating and working? Teams, Google, right? Microsoft, Zoom. But if we looked at our category, again, it was asynchronous, right? In our category, motivation, accountability are more important, arguably, than in the other categories, or arguably as important. So we saw that as an opportunity to begin to provide a similar type of access as our folks were conditioned to access in other parts of their lives. And as we look towards the future, pun intended, Rishi, there's more opportunity than ever before to help folks who haven't had the opportunity to have that personal training, or on days when they're not doing it in person, to have personalized access. And we're living in an era of massive amounts of data and hyper-personalization and one-on-one experiences in everything else that we're doing in our lives. And so there's no reason why this category isn't as prime as others for folks to have that access.
Yeah, you know, I can't second both Rishi and Austin more. I mean, I truly believe everything that they're saying, and one of the things that haven't been touched on is actually when you look at Flexit and Future, you know, dual-sided marketplaces, connecting the consumer with phenomenal experience or accountability, whether it's, you know, asynchronous or synchronous. You know, one of the things that hasn't been talked about is actually it's solving a big pain point in the industry from a supply perspective. You know, trainers are in-person training is becoming more and more difficult. And the reason why is because, you know, to Rishi's point, if it only caters to 1% of the population, that 1% is generally speaking, you know, in very affluent areas. And that those affluent areas, whether it's city centers like New York, LA, Vancouver, you know, the reality is the cost of living for trainers that are making, you know, have capped earning potential, making anywhere between, you know, $40,000 to $100,000 a year is not really achievable. And there's a reason why there's high turnover in this industry. There's a reason why, you know, people move on and change industries after, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. Capped earning potential, high level burnout. As Rishi mentioned, you know, the reality is that the demand is in the morning or in the night. So they're working long hours, you know, and the reality is it's not a 9 to 5. They're working 6, 7, 8 in the morning, and they're working 6, 7, 8 at night. And so I think, you know, it's really important, you know, this industry wouldn't be where it's at if you didn't have the high caliber expertise that exists to provide the services. And if we can't unlock opportunity for the service provider, the trainers or the fitness professionals to do the things that they love to do and deliver the expertise in the world that they want to do, you're just going to have a very disruptive, pardon the pun, disruptive process and experience, you know, because at the end of the day, the reality is that I've seen it firsthand. We had customers in our brick and mortar, our average retention was 7.2 years. Biggest pain point is turnover. You know, they would get to know a trainer, the trainer would get to know them, their goals, needs, abilities. And then after 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, their trainer leaves the industry, let alone goes out and does it on their own. And that customer experience gets impacted. So, you know, for a little kudos to Flexit in Future, I mean, you're providing not only an option for the consumer, but you're providing an option and opportunity for the industry professional as well.
It's an awesome point. And, I think there's huge systemic problems in consumer health, right? 75% of Americans are obese and overweight, and that trend is, continuing and increasing. And most of us live with chronic conditions and on and on and on. I think we've all seen the challenges. And it turns out there's a 500,000 trainers and coaches in America. There are these people who can really have an impact on this problem. Like it's so interesting. My wife is a physician and a med school professor, and there really is no reason that there should be any gap in prestige between somebody who can help you with your day-to-day habits and health and head off a lot of these problems versus somebody who can. And I don't want to draw an equivalency, but you know what I mean. There's a big perceived gap, and the experience of being a provider in those two industries is quite different. And so one of the things that you've brought up here is just the evolving opportunity for coaches, and with virtual training, as I think Austin can attest. Future, we're vertically integrated, so our coaches are employees of our business. That creates some predictability in their income and benefits and mentorship and continuity. That's a huge benefit. And then there's geographical flexibility, time flexibility. You want to have dinner with your kids every day, drop them off to school. Those were prime times to work, in an IRL world. And the way we've designed Futures, you can actually commit to doing those every single day and still be an incredible coach or trainer for somebody. And so that's really interesting. Of course, also when you're not constrained by just the folks in your neighborhood, if you have a special talent, you are really good at working with prenatal or postpartum clients or elderly or post, cardiac event rehab. You could now work with just those types of people should you choose to do that, because there's enough of them across the country, across the world. There may not be enough in your town. So there's so many compounding benefits. And what we see is greater than 95% of our coaches apply inbound to us. They're seeking an opportunity like that. We have greater than 90% retention year on year, which is, robust. And in fact, it's far greater than that. And so, so that's, I think it's a great point to bring up, that there's this really wonderful, talented group of people who giving more leverage to can be very empowering.
It's a really important point. I think, we often think about the consumer and all this, right? It's more convenient for them, which it is, but you guys are also creating big opportunities for personal trainers for them to grow their businesses, which I know is, easier said than done for a lot of personal trainers, especially before these digital options were available. Curtis, I just wanted to ask you to talk a bit about how Workout helps personal trainers monetize their audience and some features you provide to that end.
Yeah, why don't I tell you a story, a little bit of my own story. So, in the world of fitness and wellness, the people that are monetizing their influence or their impact are usually people that have a massive or significant social following, and that's just the reality. That's where it's grown to. The last 10 years, social influencers, it was a means for brands and products to connect to their consumer through people that had a large audience. And the reality is, I always say that trust doesn't scale fast. So, anybody and everybody that want to promote and recommend brands and products, if they didn't have the audience, they weren't getting the influencer deals. And so, for myself as an example, I grew up in the industry, came out of college and university, and played high level sport. And I remember being on the training floor at 23 years old, and the amount of products and brands I would be recommending, yet not getting paid or monetizing off those recommendations, was significant. And time. And then what happened was as I scaled that business, I was looking around and watching individuals that might not have the level of education or experience or expertise that I had. We're getting the brand deals. They had, their distribution channels were through social media and not through brick and mortar or not through, local community impact. And we realized and recognized that, personal trainers and wellness providers are prescriptive influencers. So they might not be social influencers, but they have a prescriptive nature behind them that they recommend brands and products all day long, and they don't get paid for that recommendation. Which really what you're saying is, hey, we're gonna pay someone that's is effective at building an audience online, but we're not going to recognize the people that are advocating for the brands and products, on a regular basis. And so, in the fitness industry, what was challenging is that if you owned a brick and mortar business, you probably weren't built to retail. You didn't want to have the inventory risk. You didn't have the inventory space. You had trainers and wellness providers that didn't know how to sell. So you didn't get into that, especially when you look at the products that exist today, whether it's, Therabody or Hyperice or, larger, products that cost a lot of money, that's not what you're thinking about, yet you're sending people, from a holistic perspective. Really, at the end of the day, where fitness and wellness has gone is, you need the complete package. So not only do you need the expert advice, the accountability, the resources, but you need the tools as well. And tools come in multiple different facets. Like it might be a tool like training when you're on your own. Yes, you can do body weight work, but is it a TRX? Is it a recovery gun like Hyperice or a Therabody gun? And then you need supplementations. Like we know that we're depleted in certain areas, such as vitamin D in most areas. And so how do you, if you're going to elicit the best health outcome working with your customer or your client, you have to recommend products to make sure that they are, equally equipped to actually be successful. And so what we did is we identified this. We identified that 98% of wellness providers don't have a level of quote unquote social influence. And how do we actually make it easy for them to essentially monetize off the influence that they have every single day? And so, what our platform does is we're a recommendation platform. We partner with all the leading brands, everything from TRX, Hyperice, Thorne supplements. We have about 185 brand partners to date. We onboard about 5 to 7 a week. And we make it extremely easy and provide access and inventory access for both asynchronous and synchronous wellness providers to essentially assemble a recommendation. So they can assemble a recommendation and they can make those recommendations, whether it's one-on-one or one-to-many. And now they're making anywhere between 10 and 18% per sale or per transaction that occurs. And so we reward, essentially what we're doing is there's 3 stakeholders at play here. What we're allowing trainers to do is actually finally monetize off the influence that they've built or monetize off the expertise that they have. Number one. Number two, for brands and products, we're actually shifting the mindset. Instead of actually, paying the advertisers to reach the consumer, they're now paying the people that are advocating for their brands and products, which is just like, it's great. Where do brands and products really want to shift their marketing spend? It's probably not on Facebook and Google. It's actually probably connecting the consumer through the people that are advocating for their brands and products. And then for the consumer, they get a trusted recommendation. The reality is that the consumer has been flooded with content, with direct ads targeting them, all the way to a ton of social content with social influencers promoting their products or goods. And so now they have a trusted source where that recommendation is coming from, and they're not paying any more. They're paying the same as what they would pay somewhere else, but they can get validated or credible advice and expert opinion on a prescriptive recommendation. And so that's what we're doing at Workout. We unlock, at the same time, we're unlocking a whole brand new revenue stream for them. Wellness professionals now can, earn on their recommendations in a very prescriptive nature, in a way that they should be earning.
Austin, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, and Rishi, I'll come to you after as well. What you guys are doing is music to the ears, I would say, of a lot of personal trainers out there and consumers. But I think for the gym and studio owners watching us, there's a little bit of trepidation, right? If they're not doing personal training in person, or if they're doing it in their home, they're not doing it in person in the studio. Austin, do you view Flexit as in competition with gyms and studios, or is it compatible?
No, we've always seen it as compatible. Actually, much of the origins of our business started with partnerships with the gyms and the studios. Much like everything else in life, things don't really fall on the ends of the spectrums. And I mentioned before data and hyper personalization as we look towards the future. But I think gyms and studios have begun to further embrace that they need to adopt digital. They're just trying to figure out how to. We've done a lot of white labeling of our technology. We power the virtual personal training platforms for Blink and Crunch, among others. And so we've always seen that there's different access points, there's different cohorts of customers. And for gyms and studios, they can work with us to extend their reach. So the brand can live beyond the 4 walls of the brick and mortar. So we're big proponents of the physical worlds and the digital worlds colliding.
And just to jump in there, I think, it's not an and or an or, it can be both, right? Like you look at the consumer that's accessing personal training, they're on the road a significant amount of time, having the flexibility to, participate in some sort of guided activity, whether it's personal training or some level of activity on the road. If they're used to accountability in the brick and mortar experience, chances are they need, or they're looking for the accountability on the road as well. And so whether it's a synchronous or asynchronous service, I think that, both exist. I just had to jump in there. Even I look at Reimagining with Future, at the end of the day, you might have a top level CEO, executive, athlete that, is looking for that in-person experience 1 or 2 days a week, but also needs high level programming and accountability on the other 5 days. And so, I think, the reality is that the disruption that we've seen in the last 3 years with companies like Future and Flexit has provided a holistic service offering for the consumer that it's not, it's and or nor, it's both, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I would take it even a step further. Not only are these ideas complementary, at least with Future, what we've observed is that the majority of our members are using Future in a gym. And so again, it's asynchronous. You don't have to have the video on, so it's a slightly different experience. But we work with many gyms. Many will know us. We understand the layouts of every club, so that we're not building circuits and supersets that send you up to the second floor and back to the first floor. We understand physically where you are. If you're going to a hotel, we call the hotel, understand what's in that gym, build for that. You don't have to do anything as a consumer. You text your coach, here's where I am. I typically on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm here. On Wednesdays, I'm at home. I like to run outside when it's nice, and we'll do the rest. And actually, what we found, we did this very interesting study with one of the national gyms. And we found that when people had a coach, a virtual coach with Future, 70% of those people checked into their gym more often, and each person checked in 65% more often. Because now what's happening is this person, they're signed up for the gym. They want to use that facility. And now every morning someone texts them to say, hey, pack your bag, Rishi. At lunchtime, you're supposed to hit the gym. And so there's this little method of accountability to get you back in. In addition, when people show up to a gym, a lot of people don't know what to do. There's a gap in expertise. As Austin said, there is a big, especially with some subsets of the population, younger people, women, there's an intimidation factor of being on the floor with all these folks and beginners. And so now you not only have an accountability mechanism to get your self into the gym, you also feel empowered because you have a plan. You're not going to ride the elliptical for 10 minutes, get no results, do that, rinse and repeat for 3 months and then quit. You actually are using more of the space because your coach is telling you, let's go do a dumbbell split squat. Now let's go do something over here. Let's use some bands. So using more of the facility, you build your confidence, you come more often, you get better results, and it's actually quite virtuous. And when we do partner with physical facilities, what we find is one of the most valuable things that we can do for a facility is share information. Who are your customers? What equipment are they using when they're inside the 4 walls? And then what are they doing when they're outside the 4 walls? How does that inform you in terms of serving them better? And so there's not only that physical layer of data, of biometrics and physical activity, we also, like I said, are talking to this person multiple times a day. So what is your population feeling? Are they stressed? Are they concerned about things? And what does that spectrum of mental readiness look like by time of day, by different types of person? So there's a lot here that digital systems, when integrated with in-person systems, can provide a wonderful congruent hospitality experience to somebody. A lot of care can be delivered that way. And then they never stop working out. It's not like the day I can't make it to the gym, I do nothing. I can now actually do something at home, and that's all part of one continuous spectrum of activity. So we think there's a huge opportunity here.
Yeah, I think just to jump in there, you briefly touched on it, but the online coach or virtual coach also, because of the flexibility they have in their schedules and their workday, and especially in the asynchronous model, like what Future's doing, they have access to data and they can coach people on their data and the technology like that they gain through technology, whether it's their Apple Watch, their Aura, whatever it might be, their Whoop band. The reality is that when you're in a gym in the 4 walls and you're a trainer and you're training 35 hours, exchanging 35 hours of your time for 35 hours of service, you know, the likelihood and time and energy and effort that has to go into analyzing, you know, data, online programming, coaching, items like that. It's not possible to do it effectively, you know, unless you're planning on working a 50, 60-hour work week. And so that combination of, we see it time and time again where, you know, the consumer will work with a trainer twice a week, but they'll also have an online coach. And that might be a completely different person, right? And a completely different brand or business. And so, you know, I think about it where, you know, someone meets someone twice a week to get the accountability, to get a little bit harder workout. Yeah. And, you know, and then, you know, when they're in their off days or just on a daily basis, they're being held accountable through education, expertise, data, you know, programming, you know, and other facets of their wellness and their wellness journey. And let alone, you know, I think also we see a lot of times that people graduate from the in-person experience and then they're looking for higher level expertise based on their goals, whether it's, you know, someone that's, you know, ambitious to go and run a marathon or a triathlon, an Ironman, you know, and they're looking for that expertise that might not be reside in their local area, at which point they'll get an online coach for that purpose. So there's a lot of use cases where both the in-person and the virtual, whether it's asynchronous or synchronous, comes together.
One thing about all three companies is probably one of the most overlooked innovations is what has been done to the workforce with these models. I know gyms have struggled to get folks back, but the number of folks who are either previously had been trainers or had worked in adjacencies and are now trainers or want to become trainers and can do so flexibly and within the confines of whatever else they're doing in their lives, or if they want to specifically focus on this, right? This segment has been able to expand the workforce, the segment being the digital providers. And there's a lot of different ways to interface now, depending upon what you're looking for, right? Whether it's what workout affords you or the way that we're doing things or the way that the future is and many others. So I just want to highlight for the industry and for the audience and attendees that there's a lot of innovation going on the professional side. Some of which may be glazed over when we're talking about gym studios and consumers and marketing and things of that sort.
Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate your time. This is a fantastic conversation.
Thanks for having us, Josh. Appreciate it. Great to be here.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks.